we were looking at school for our oldest child, Aiden, we looked at both independent schools as well as public schools. We have terrific public schools in our area. But we also knew that each of our children were going to be curious and different, and we're going to love learning a little bit differently and need certain things that allow them to fulfill that curiosity. And when we first toured PBS, and at the time we were thinking about public or independent, but we saw how well the teachers collaborated. We saw how well the teachers understood the needs of each child and talked about that. We looked at the specialists that PBS had, and we looked at the way they collaborated. So if there was a child that was either excelling or needed support in certain areas, it took a whole community, and that was something that we found really unique in the independent school system that we thought could really support our individual kids' needs. I was particularly struck by, we had attended a library program where we had a bunch of student ambassadors at PBS talk to us, and you could see that these fifth graders not just really felt confident in who they were, felt confident in what they could share with us, but also loved PBS. We knew that it was a really special place when you saw these fifth graders that had been through the full education years here at PBS and just wanted to give back by spending their time, and that was pretty rare among the other schools that we had toured.
I recall the fifth grade library experience, and I walked away thinking, wow, these kids are impressive. I mean, they're well-rounded, they're thoughtful, they're well-spoken, and they were also kind, caring, and it came across very prominently when you spoke to them. I mean, they were, what, 9, 10 years old, 11 years old. It's like, I could have a conversation with you. You are an interesting person. You're getting a whole experience where your child is going to be cared for, to learn how to love to learn. Kids are going to learn how to be kind, caring, compassionate, and you can get that at home, but there's something different when you're with your peers, with teachers who reinforce that, and it's not just talking the talk, it actually does happen in the classroom.
It is, you know, a big investment of resources, especially given that we have 3 with a 4th entering. But you know, when I think of the amount of time that our children now spend at PBS versus at home, it's the best investment we can make, because the amount of hours are here, not just with their educators, but also with their peers, and knowing that their peers and they share the same values around respect and being able to be kind to each other is something really important that I think you find unique in a small school environment. And so when we think of the investment, we think of the ability to actually launch our little children into the world independently and know that they've got the skills to not just be contributors to society, but also be able to respect the surroundings.
And be good global citizens one day when they're not around you.
There's so many things.
The community. I think PBS has a wonderful community, whether it's, you know, teachers for sure, the administration for sure. But the parents make up what, you know, when we interviewed some of the parents who either went to PBS, have kids at PBS, or have kids who graduated from PBS, it was always the same thing. You know, there's wonderful, kind, caring parents at PBS, and they really invest their time, no matter how busy they are or where they are in the world.
I mean, I love PBS. It's, you know, as a first-time parent joining PBS community, this is our first formal school experience with our oldest son, and you know, I think PBS really was a partner for us in learning how to be a better parent. I think PBS does a great job of parent education and making sure that the parents feel supported along with our children, and that's a unique, you know, quality I think that PBS just needs to remain focused on and has remained focused on. While there are wonderful things that PBS is continuing to remain at its core focus, which I hope we never lose, I do like that PBS is also saying, well, there are more things that we can focus on, there are more things we can do. Where is their enrichment programs? Where are there educators and faculty resources we can bring in? Not just for our children, for our teachers as well. What's ongoing professional education we can provide? What are the best-in-class resources we can provide to our faculty?
I mean, you're taking feedback from parents on a regular basis, and I know some of the feedback was on some of the curriculum, and PBS went out and invested in training teachers, training parents to understand the curriculums, and that shouldn't change, because that, again, that's what makes PBS PBS. It's all inclusive. You know, if you have a question, the doors are always open. Someone's always happy to tell you about, you know, why we're doing it this way versus another way, and why we think this way is better.
Well, you know, we've been lucky enough to partner with Mark Brackett out of Yale, and I've had the privilege of seeing him as a parent and also observing him and seeing how he's interacting with the classroom and the tools he's bringing to PBS. I love the approach of thinking about emotional intelligence and not just talking about it and talking about how people feel, but also giving really tangible tools that kids and faculty and parents can use to help identify and support the emotions.
I think the biggest thing for me is, because of PBS, I think I communicate with my kids better than I would normally. They express themselves better. You know, we don't have meltdowns and kids kicking and screaming about things, because they actually can say things like, well, I'm sad, or I'm upset, or I didn't like that. I didn't like the way you spoke to me, or I didn't like the way my brother spoke to me, or my sister spoke to me. The communication is much clearer, and that comes from emotional intelligence rather than a cognitive intelligence, where you can express your feelings. I think kids are definitely learning at their own pace. You know, if you're ahead, if you're behind, you're not just put in a bucket and this is what we're doing today. I mean, from preschool through 4th grade now, very few of the projects have been the same. It's all been kid-led.
Yeah, I would say that the things that have been most surprising to me positively around the curriculum has been things that when I was growing up we didn't even spend time doing. So for example, our son Aiden in 3rd grade did civil rights monologues, and you know, it's not traditional math or reading, but yet incorporates everything from reading to social sciences and social studies to history lessons, and then finally to being able to produce it and stand on stage and have the confidence to be able to articulate and respect the figure that he had researched. I think that having 3 kids that have gone through the kindergarten program and looking at the way that they learned elementary, learning how to read, all of them had different techniques, all of them have different needs, and all of them felt really well supported. And so when I think of an individualized education, I think of PBS. I have many stories having lots of kids here over the years, but I think that looking at any of these stories that allow for our children to be not just better learners, but better global citizens, as Zain said earlier, and for us to be more thoughtful parents, and for us to learn the tools that support our kids' individual needs, those are things that I think are very unique to PBS that you don't find at other independent schools. The collaboration, the community connection, all of those things are embedded in everything PBS does meaningfully.
I think if you want your child to love learning, this is a place for your kid. I mean, they're always innovating, always creating new content, new teaching styles. You know, if you want your kid to be well-rounded as far as an individual, kind, caring, compassionate, generous, you know, those are all the things that happen at PBS without any doubt. I mean, our kids come home and they are all of those things and more. And if you want a community where you're going to be, you know, respected as a person, a parent, I mean, this is by far a very kind, caring community where people definitely want to reach out to you, want you to be a part of their lives.